What's up, everybody? Today on the Yours Truly podcast, I have Graham Pardun in the virtual studio. Graham reached out to me via email after catching me on Paul Vanderklay's enlightening Friday live stream entitled, "Is Orthodoxy the One True Church or Another Carrot in the Stew of American Christianity?" His email began with these kind words: "Christian, hey brother, I just wanted to say I resonated deeply with your insights during the recent discussion. Your voice is truly appreciated." Intrigued by Graham's thoughtful message, I discovered that he, like myself, is navigating the labyrinth of the meaning crisis. Graham shared a glimpse of his journey, revealing a background in Protestantism, a decade-long wandering phase, followed by 13 years embracing Orthodoxy, and now finds himself on a fresh path of exploration. Eager to dive into conversation craft with Graham, I extended an invitation to him to join me on the podcast to begin to dig around some of the layers of his introspection out loud. Digging deeper, I unearthed Graham's substantial contributions to the literary world. He curates an acclaimed Substack newsletter entitled Sabbath Empire, boasting over 1,000 subs, and penned the thought-provoking book Sunlilies, Eastern Orthodoxy as a Radical Counterculture, published by Sista Mystica Press in 2023, endorsed by none other than Paul Kingsnorth. With much anticipation and curiosity, I welcome Graham Pardun to our discussion today. So, without further ado, I give you Graham Pardun. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. Good morning, Graham.
That was nice, man. Good morning.
It's fun.
Like acclaimed. I had to laugh at acclaimed, man. I don't, crashing and burning might be more accurate with the Substack, but yeah, I appreciate it.
No worries, man. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I'm playing around with some Chat GPT, and I wrote an intro and I said, "Can you make this sound more professional?" And acclaimed was one of those more professional words that that the LLM spit out, so people can get controversial on my use of art. And you told me that you're a writer and you like spend so much time on like each sentence, and I'm like this, bastardizing just. But yeah, dude, welcome.
Yeah, my real goal in life is to never be replicated by Chat GPT, to write so crazy that there's no way it could ever. Yeah. Acclaimed. I never use the word acclaimed.
Exactly.
I never will.
Here I am.
This right here. This is the only time I'll ever say the word acclaimed ever. Okay, people can go back and check
mark my words. All right. So you reached out to me and you specifically said I was picking up what you were putting down on that live stream with Paul Vanderklay. What was I putting down?
Yeah, well, that was that conversation with Joseph. Everybody's getting all fired up, and I think his point, which you were trying to flesh out, although it was kind of a crowded space with a lot of jostling. His point was just to point out the absurdity of you drive an hour or 2 hours to an Orthodox church. It's like there's this big wave of people coming in, or people who want to come in, but they're out in the middle of nowhere. Most of America's an Orthodox desert. And what's more important, being right, having beautiful worship, having history, or dealing with the people who are right next to you? And you were saying something along the lines of, in your town, there is no Orthodox church, and there's not gonna be. So kind of resonating with what Joseph was saying, and how do you deal with that? Do you live this online life where you're watching hardcore Patriarch Kirill give these massive liturgies with 1,000 priests and this, in Russia? Do you live vicariously that way? Or how do you connect with the people that are actually nearby? I love that. I mean, that's a deep question. And I just want to hear more of where you were going with that.
Sure.
And two, I relate. I'm going to maybe talk about this later, but I'm pretty near the Twin Cities. in Minnesota. So Joseph, man, let's hang out. But I'm building a house far away where there isn't an Orthodox church, and there's not going to be. And I've been pondering that question for a long time. But anyway, I just want to hear more of what you were trying to say with that first.
I'm trying to decide, do I try to go down that road, or because that was like the initial prompt, but I also like want to get context to you as a person. And so, and you mentioned in there that you were, kind of raised, I guess, Protestant, normie American Christian or something, and then wandered off and then found yourself in Orthodox for like over a decade. And then you even pinned your book, which is like Orthodoxy is a radical counterculture. And now it sounds like you said, and I don't know if that's, I want to tease out your story. Like, I mean, and then we can get into the, like the kind of the future ideas, but let's like kind of, rando this thing, PVK this thing, and kind of like, I've talked about me a lot on here, but you mentioned that you have like almost zero social media presence, and so like it'd be hard for people to kind of know Graham, the man behind the acclaimed Substack. And
Yep.
so, yeah, man, let's dive in there first.
All right. It's hard for Graham to know Graham.
Sure.
I mean, what? So, I grew up moving around. First of all, that's the American thing, or an American thing. I was born in Atlanta, lived there till I was 9, just starting to form, first friendships, and then we moved to Manhattan, Kansas, and lived there for 5 years, and starting to form like those middle school friendships, and then we moved to North Carolina. By the way, where do you live?
Arkansas.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I spent a long time in North Carolina. So
Arkansas.
Arkansas. Yeah. And then I moved. So I was in North Carolina for high school and college, and then as we talk, I'll probably get more and more Southern in my speech because it's just your voice is bringing me home, man. I said I appreciate your voice. I'm like that Southern voice, man. No, I moved to Chicago, and then to Iceland, and then back to North Carolina, and then Minnesota. So I grew up internalizing this idea of having a home. This, when people talk about they're still best friends with their buddy they met in first grade. I don't know what that is. I don't, high school. I know one guy left from high school. I don't know what that is. And so probably I've had the American experience too, an extreme in some ways. And my spiritual wanderings have been like that. It's like when something starts to feel like home, like I'm out of here, man. So there's that background. It's like the placelessness that is acute in America and people talked about for a long time. So this longing for place, and also this inability to know what that is like. Spiritually, I grew up Presbyterian, PCA, Calvinist, and which is a very cerebral religion. And I was always kind of a smart dude. I liked ideas and stuff, and so it was kind of the typical, like the walls are blank and the guy's talking a lot, and it's like all up in the head. And so end of high school, early college, my buddy that I went to Iceland with, Henry, hey man, he took me to an Anglican church, and that was my first encounter with incense, icons, candlelight, chanting, the whole immersive experience that for normal people and most of world history is just what normal religion is. And I've always had this thirst for beauty. I mean, I like ideas, but I long for beauty even more. I mean, the ideas can be moved around. The beauty has to be there though. From that moment, there's no way I could carry on in the old way. And anyway, that, I probably my happiest times spiritually in college were going to this Anglican church on Sunday evenings where they did a compline service. It's all, dark, candlelit, incense, everything. You just go in quietly, sit down. Nobody talks to anybody. A small choir shuffles in on the right, turn on their lamps and sing 4-part harmony for half an hour, and then shuffle out. Everybody gets up and leaves. Like, no sermon, no ideas at all. The singing was all in Latin. I had no idea what they're saying and didn't really want to know. It's just like the pure sensory transcendence thing. But I did it all, man. I moved to Chicago. Well, it was in end of high school, early college. I started getting into Orthodox.
How old are you?
I'm 41.
Okay.
So this is a while ago. This is 20, a while ago. I started getting into Orthodoxy back then, 20 plus years ago, reading Dostoevsky in high school. Me and Henry are both really into Dostoevsky. That's lit us up as he does many people. People go through that transformation.
He lit up Peterson, didn't he?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Like this psychological depth, like where is this coming from? This whole other world that you wouldn't suspect existed in Christianity if what you grow up with is the American stuff. And we were just on fire, man. And actually, we started learning Russian together. I lasted about a week. Henry, I'm pretty good. I learned other languages, but Henry's like a phenom, man. And he's way more disciplined than I am. He became totally fluent in Russian. He lives in Russia now, and has for a long time. So he went, but he never became Orthodox. Although he lives in Russia, he's surrounded by Orthodoxy. He knows what it's like. He's not over here in America idealizing Holy Russia.
What is strange? What is well, I say from an Orthodox perspective, it's not that strange, but
yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah. Where was I? 20 years ago.
Yeah, I guess after college, you maybe headed towards Orthodoxy out of Anglicanism a little bit.
Yeah. Right. So, Bart Ehrman, that guy? He gave a talk at this church, which was great. He told some great stories as he does, but that kind of blew open my whole like Protestant sola scriptura thing. Like,
yep.
Like, okay, that's gone. In one 40-minute talk, that's gone. That evaporated. And then I was getting into like church history, going through the whole roller coaster ride that people do now, and then so getting into Orthodoxy that way. And Henry and I finally, after books for a long time, decided to actually go visit church. And he somehow found this Serbian Orthodox girl. And she was like, yeah, come to my church. It's awesome, man. Like, she gave us directions, and we go, it's like 40 minutes away. We're driving up one street, down the other, looking, never could find that church. And so we went to Bojangles instead. Bojangles, they have that in
it's like
Kansas.
Yeah, it's like a.
Oh my gosh!
It like a Louisiana chain or something like that?
Is it? I don't know, man. I only know it from North Carolina, but
food or chicken or something like. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I know it's a.
Seasons.
I know it's a little. Yeah.
Yeah. people in the north don't know about Bojangles. They're missing out. But anyway, we went to Bojangles and broke bread, man. Broke biscuit.
That's right.
And anyway, I realized later we were looking for like the golden onion domes and stuff, because we've been reading Dostoevsky. The church was in a strip mall.
Oh, man.
So we're like
Orthodox Church plant. Like,
yeah,
Orthodox
I mean,
Church plant.
it was amazing. But yeah, totally. I just share that because I think part of my story has been this visionary and reality and
idealizing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just trying to reconcile those things. But yeah, it was in a strip mall, and but as soon as we walked in, you leave the whole strip mall world behind, and there's this other world, and I was hooked, man. It was amazing. So I did that for a while, but I never did convert then because there's this whole like if you're like in high school and you're a Calvinist, you can just play with ideas all day long, and that's what it is to be a Christian,
Yep. I call it mental.
But the whole like, yeah. It's the mental ascent. You're like it's all happening here, and for God, it's all happening here too. He's like thinking of you a certain way, and then making stuff happen. Now he's thinking about you in a different way. It's like it's all up here. It's crazy. But the Orthodox path is like going within and shining the light within and getting down, and like I don't want to go there. And even you're like share your story, like like I've in the past 20 years I've grown up some, and I can look within now, and part of my writing is like that going within, but definitely in my 20s I had no desire to do that whatsoever, so made up weird theological reasons to just get out and move to Chicago and tried everything. I went to all kinds of different things. My favorite was this Mennonite church where they were really like, their church was ugly, man, and the music was terrible, but it didn't matter, because what mattered to them was we're all going to live in this neighborhood, and we're going to feed each other, and we're going to drag the poor and the hungry, people who need clothing, like everybody's part of this.
Yeah, and so you're hitting on. I see the themes. There's like 3 right there. I mean, I want you to keep going, but I'm trying to just like make a point out loud, so maybe I remember it. But keep going.
Well, okay. Well, do you want to share the 3 themes?
Well, one is, yeah. Well, you talk about the idealization, and I see an ideal, and I want to like chase after it and get as close to it as I can. Like that's how I approach doing worship music, like the Christian worship music stuff. And it's kind of a similar impulse. And you even feel that, I think, in your writing, it sounded like, when you were talking about wanting to get every word right. I don't remember if we were backstage when we were talking about that, but this impulse, like, okay, so religion, if you're kind of raised in the Calvinist thing, the religion is in the mind, you're like, okay, and then you go and you have a religious, like the experience of the embodied type of religious practice. And then you see this like you see like, and all of it's real. And then you see the Mennonites doing the things that the ortho bros idealize, which is like this life, this embodied like community. And no offense to ortho, I'm just using, that's kind of like when I've had my brief interactions with a little bit of that, is like, you don't get it, man. What we need like these small town, like, I'm sure you're kind of like familiar with the ethos. And I was like, well, from where I'm from, I grew up like that because I'm from a town of 300 people. Like, you can't idealize that for me. Like, but like I said, there's no Orthodox town or no Orthodox. So it's like, and you've just hit on all of these things. And so, And I'm attracted to the idealization of a religious practice and a religious embodiment that's way more past just what I can think about God. Like, I am really attracted to that, but there's like the thing, like you said, picking up what I was putting down. I guess that is what I was putting down, and what I think it sounds like you're wrestling with too, which is, okay, so if I move an hour or two away from, I'm assuming that at some point maybe you got catechized and baptized or something, but that if you move away from that, does that mean, is that my moving away from the true thing, and if, but I've experienced something about the truth of Christian community in this Mennonite experience, and it didn't sound like you were totally, poo-pooing on Calvinism just because it was cerebral, because I think you see the validity of that too, and I do too. So I resonate deeply with what you're wrestling with, and I think that makes me, it's really cool that resonance was like picked up in this digital space. So I want you to continue with your story, but I'm just kind of bouncing back at you of like,
Yeah.
okay, I think I see. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So,
Amen, man. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I had all these experiences with all different kinds of ways of doing Christianity. And, as I go along and kind of, embrace some like idealization and then shed some of the illusions, then I do look back and remember some treasures from the things I left behind, including, Calvinism. A lot of things were a lot of those things shaped me in ways I didn't understand, and then I could draw on them when trying to think my way through, like, why do I think about Orthodoxy like this, but what I'm feeling is, so I'm picking up treasures as I go, but not finding any place where all the treasures are, but yeah, so in Chicago, the Mennonite community was awesome, and that's yeah, there wasn't prostrations and incense and chanting, so like that element of embodiment. I mean, it'd be easy to slide those things in, It's not like there's a monopoly on those things in Orthodoxy, like those, you could be a Tibetan Buddhist and have all those things, right? You can be anything and have all those things. Probably not Calvinist. You probably couldn't be Calvinist and have all those things. I don't know. I haven't really kept up with it. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe Paul has something different to say about that. I don't know.
he talked about iconoclasm recently, actually, about with somebody. He talked about why he's okay maybe with like a PowerPoint image of something sometimes, but he talked about how he's still, like, I guess it's in the Heidelberg Catechism that there's stuff about iconography, trying to engrave an image of Jesus, and he has reasons why so, I mean, but he's not the kind of guy that obviously is gonna, like, that's gonna define how he's gonna communicate with people or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. But anyway.
Well, I wrote there's a piece up on my Substack.
Shout out to the Sabbath Empire.
Yeah. All the faces of living ones are alike, which goes through my new feelings about iconography post 2020, and why I think it's dangerous. It's beautiful but dangerous. Anyway, just throwing that out there. But so embodiment. So this Mennonite group didn't have that kind of, like, spiritual practice kind of thing going on, but the idea of koinonia, or fellowship, life in common, like, they embodied that aspect of the gospel to a degree that I have yet to see again, and I miss that, man. I miss that. I also did a phase in a vineyard church, which is cool. Yeah, man. I was all over the place, man. And that's actually where I got baptized.
Okay.
Well, as I would call it.
In the Holy Spirit, or
No, in a kiddie pool.
okay.
I mean, I actually, I did get baptized in the Holy Spirit, but I forgot about it. I forgot that part. I mean, it's kind of weird, all these things that go in there, and then they don't come out again for a long time. But if you back up to college again, post early Orthodox explorations, post difficult breakup, trying to, in emotional shambles and open to something new. There was this charismatic group. They were doing like something in the downstairs of my dorm, and what's going on, and it's like a prayer and worship service and stuff, and these guys were like, do you have the Holy Spirit? And I'm like, I don't know, I don't even really actually know what that question means, or how to answer it. I don't know, man. And he's like, well, you would know if you did. Like, okay, well then no. He's like, let us lay hands on you. We'll pray that you receive the Spirit. And I'm like, I'm cool. Like, yeah, I need something. Like, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, that's cool. I mean, these guys are nice. They're enthusiastic in the literal sense. Like, God is in them, and it's like coming out of God's coming out of their eyeballs, and their shining faces. Like they got something I don't have and haven't seen before, and they I was like, yeah, man, and they laid hands on me and prayed for me, and they're speaking in tongues, and I thought, it's pretty weird, but nice too. It's nice. A bunch of like dudes who are like, you can tell they've suffered and have followed, they've gone down the path, they have wisdom, they know what they're doing, and they're like, they're not weak, just having a bunch of older dudes like that show care. Like, hey, we want to put you in the circle and put our hands on your shoulders and just pray that you have all this life flowing out of you now. Like, that's beautiful, man. That's and and they did, and then it was like, they're like, do you feel anything? No. And they're like, that's fine, maybe later. I was like, yeah, cool. And then I was walking to the dining hall, and I felt this urge to not go eat. I felt this urge to go walk somewhere, and I followed this urge, and I walked for a while until I couldn't hear anybody. Nobody was around. I sat under this tree, and then started like sobbing, like dry heaving, and like speaking in tongues. And I was like, wow, what is this? And then I looked up at the sky, and I felt very intensely that God is my Father. And I knew that in a way that I didn't know that before. And then for the next 3 days, I was totally chilled out. And I'm kind of like an anxious guy, like kind of nervous energy and stuff, mind bouncing around and stuff. For 3 days, I was totally chilled out, calm in every situation. When people would ask me questions, I knew exactly what to say, and they're like, wow, didn't have any like my usual impulses to sin. They were just like at rest. They were gone. And I did a lot of sitting under trees and praying from the heart, And then after 3 days, I just like moved on with my life and forgot about it for like 20 years. But why are we talking? Oh, you said, did you receive the Holy Spirit?
Well, I was, making a little bit of tongue in cheek just because Vineyard's kind of moderately, charismatic in their. Well, I don't know if moderate's the right word, but
I don't think moderate. Yeah.
they're not like straight up Pentecostal, but they're, you know, they're definitely in the charismatic movement. So that's
Oh
why
yeah.
that's why I was.
Yeah.
But you know, hearing you tell your story is just. I sat down with my parents this weekend. My dad was. I mean, I would still consider him a charismatic. Like, he's not operated in charismatic circles for a while, but that's like his heart, like, of his faith, you know. And we were in charismatic churches some when I was younger, and like I feel like I've you know, journeyed from that place, you know. But that, as I was sitting there having that conversation with them, and I was trying to understand it better as an adult, trying to understand it uh, from their perspective as young adults when we going through that, and I want to carry, like, it's easy to caricature and all these different spaces, which was what is beautiful about your story, is it's like not a caricature of any of it. And so, yeah, I think that it's good. I don't know, like, it's good. Like, you know, that's what I want to say about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's good. And yeah, man, I'm loving that. So we haven't quite got to the point where it seems, well, we kind of have brushed on it, but so you've had these wide, you know, a wide range of the Christian experience, the Christian religion, the Christian faith, and you've written about it. You know, you do write about it. You just talked about a recent thing you wrote about with iconography, and then you know, so I don't know if you want to fill in more gaps about kind of where you're at now and how what we're finding ourselves, where we're finding ourselves now. I don't know if there's some other stuff you want to fill in for there.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Let me tell the rest of the story.
Yep.
If that's all right.
Oh,
We got a little time.
Yeah, we got time.
Just to round it out and get to the present day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got baptized in that vineyard church.
Mm-hmm.
In a kiddie pool. Yeah. So I got sprinkled on the head as a teenager in the Presbyterian church. And like maybe my third time at this vineyard church, this Peter, this old South African dude, he's totally awesome, man. He's like, Graham, have you been baptized? And I said, yeah, they did the sprinkling on the, he's like, no, that baptizo literally means to submerge underwater. So that if you haven't been submerged underwater, like, you literally have not been baptized. You know, that's just what that word means. And he talked about, like that baptizo, that was the word that was used when soldiers drowned, or when you're dyeing cloth, it's baptizo, it's not sprinkled. It's totally submerged. And I thought about it for about 2 seconds and said, yeah, okay. You're right. So the next Sunday I got baptized in a kiddie pool, with my friend Dane. May he rest in peace. I mentioned Dane. Dane was he was a cool guy, man. He was one of my closest friends in Chicago. He I'll mention Dane because because I love him, and also because the fact that we were baptized together shapes how I think about baptism. He and I, we were both dunked in the kiddie pool. It was October in Chicago, and Peter thought it'd be funny to put a bunch of ice in the kiddie pool. Which now I'm like, I do like the whole Wim Hof, like cold bathing, and, and I'm like, man, yeah, that's right, man. Put that ice in there. Dane took his own life when we were still in Chicago. And so since then, I did become Orthodox years later. And at the time, this was before the Peter Hears, like, everybody, if you can become Orthodox, you got to be baptized, like that's what the church says. That may or may not be true, but that's like kind of one of the things now is like, people who were baptized in some other Christian tradition. Like if you come to this understanding that the Orthodox Church is the only church that there is, and the only way to be a Christian is to be Orthodox, then whatever happened before that, it's like, it's not even real. So, you have to be baptized. My priest wasn't of that mentality, and this was way before all that broke out. Anyway, this was in the days when, if you were baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit by at least a somewhat legitimate Christian body, then that was your baptism, and then you're chrismated to complete the baptism. It's kind of a compromise where you don't have to completely repudiate everything that came before, but it's like, it is an initiation. But part of me longs for like some kind of really deep initiation. I can understand these ortho bros who, like, if their priest won't baptize them, that they go somewhere to some more hardcore place that will baptize them. I understand that you want this complete death to the old life and reemergence into something totally new. Yeah, I think young dudes in America are longing for initiation. So I say all that, and I understand all that, but I've always, like, I have this thing, like, my baptism was what happened when Dane and I did that together. You know what I mean? So so that's just part of my story, and that's another dimension too.
Well, that speaks to meaning. Your brother that, God rest his soul, like that speaks to attaching something, that was an embodiment, like, and that was 2 or 3 are gathered. Like, there's deep things there. And the search for doing the finding the true thing, like, is like getting that, no offense to those guys, but like, I get the impulse, like you're talking about, like that America is like nothing to offer 20-year-old men, but it's that's still like a mental thing. Like, I've got to get the certainty, and I've got to get and of course there is like I want to do the intense, I want to do something, like the challenge, it's a mixture of a lot of those things, but I hear what you're saying. Dude, I'm gonna pause this, and we're back. I just slurped down a ton of caffeine, and I was like, oh man, this thing.
I'm going again, round 2 here.
Yeah, I've still got quite a bit left, but yeah, man. So the deep meaning attached to your baptism, and I love your journey, man, because we want clean certainty. We want truth to be something that we can write down, or something, like that we can formalize, and it's just it's not that simple, and parts of it are not that simple. So yeah, man, keep going.
Yeah, it's not that simple, and the challenge of, the challenges, like the bodily challenges of Orthodoxy are, it's good, make prostrations, fast, all that stuff. Young dudes or anybody, and it's not just young guys, it's everybody in America, except for farmers, are like, what the heck do we do with ourselves? Restless, don't know what to do with our bodies. But the even more difficult thing is to relate to other humans as they are. That Mennonite church was not beautiful. You wouldn't make YouTube videos, like Mennonite edit, like boom, boom, boom. Here's like you know, our worship is like sick, awesome, man. Like you're suck. Like you would, if you put a YouTube video, like, you know, edit together, it just looks like, it would look like garbage. It's terrible. You know, it's ugly. The beauty was somewhere else. The beauty was in how they treated one another. Same thing with the Vineyard Church, you know, I mean, like a turquoise kiddie pool is not liturgically correct. That's, but it's like you say, it's the meaning there is deeper than the liturgical non-beauty of it, you know. That Dane and I were like reborn together, and I would say I've been looking for the where two or three are gathered thing for a long time, you know. That know and be known fellowship, koinonia, you know. And I think that's what I'm looking for. So let's see, to complete the story, that was Chicago. Let's see, I left Chicago, went to Iceland, came back to North Carolina. I was pretty much like, you know, nothing. You know, oh my Lord. So this is not included in the treasures that I'm keeping from. And you know, Henry and I were like, he's kind of, you know, I've always had this longing for Jesus, and he's always had this respect for Christianity as like what our civilization is, and with those two things combined, when we were in Iceland, finally when it came time for Easter, we're like, man, we should go to a church, pay our respects, you know, whatever that means. We should, and you know, it's in Iceland, it's like in a lot of European countries, it's like Lutheranism is the state religion, you know, it's all state funded, you know, the choir, the organ master, the priests, they're all salaried by the state and everything. And we went to this Easter service that was kind of all right for a while, and then they had the kids choir come out and sing an ABBA song. That was just like this, like the kids didn't know what they're singing because their English wasn't that good, but they were singing some like "Ooh Baby," and they're just like, we're like, what the hell is this? Like, we're out of here, man. Like, you know, okay, so I was just kind of like, maybe like in the what the hell is this frame for a while. But I lived on this hippie commune in North Carolina. It's lovely. I mean, kind of. I mean, like, it's great in that it's a bunch of people who want to build houses with their own hands and grow food with their own hands. You know, like, that's wonderful and it's great. It was also people who didn't want to function in society. That's why they came to this place. Like, I didn't want to function in society. That's why I came to that place. And everybody was doing their own thing spiritually. And it really came to a head when Rosie the goat died. I'm kind of going all over the place with this story, but Rosie was awesome, man. Rosie was cool. I learned how to milk goats, milking Rosie. She died. She ate some like bread or something, and you know, they can't handle that. And, you know, she died a very painful death. Anyway, we had this like ceremony for Rosie, and like everybody had something different to do with that. I wrote her a poem and threw it in the grave. Somebody was doing like Tibetan bowls. Other people were like burning sage to the four directions, which is all like in a way beautiful. But I also thought, man, like, this is not the future, you know, like there is such a thing as like, we do need a coherent spiritual vision to match the community living off the land with coherent. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like that needs to be there. And so that, that's one of the reasons I left, and I decided to become a teacher and moved up to Minnesota to be close to my sister, who subsequently left Minnesota. I love you, Grace. And I was at my sister's house for a New Year's Eve party, and there's this guy there, very quiet dude, and Grace was like, "You should talk to that guy, man. He's becoming Orthodox. I know you used to be interested in Orthodoxy." And so I was like, "Yeah, what's up, man?" And I was kind of telling my story and why I never became Orthodox, and I kind of had this out of body, like I saw myself talking, and it was just BS. It's just like all up here, like I'm giving all these reasons, but it's not really the reasons. And I just stopped. I was like, "Hey, Justin, should I become Orthodox?" And he was like, "You could." And like, I was like, that was refreshing, man. That's what the Ortho bro should do, man. Like, you could. And that was liberating. I went to his church, and it was on the Sunday of the prodigal son, and I'm always like trying to make meaning. It was like, "Oh, I'm the prodigal son," and it's like that was all there was to it, really. And it's like, I'm gonna do this no matter what. And then 13 years later, I'm like, after 13 years, I still don't really know these people, and they still don't really know me. I mean, I have some close friends, but there's no, what I really want is face to face. And this is kind of like, this is the big theme for me now in my writing, face to face. That's what I think we're looking for. I'm looking for anyway. I think some of us woke up to that in 2020, when it's like, I don't know what it was like for you guys, but in the Orthodox world, almost everybody shut down and just live streaming liturgies, and you just watch, and it's like,
that psychologically is there was so much going on with all of this.
Yeah.
Like, just saying that out loud. We were live streaming liturgies. That's not what that is, but I know what you're saying. But
right.
Yeah.
It's crazy. For me, that was a wake up call. Like, I'm never, you could feel it intensely in 2020 when you're just like watching something happen from an infinite distance that other people are doing. And the bishops are saying, like, stay home. If you don't stay home, you don't love your neighbor. Like, you love your neighbor by not meeting together with, it's just crazy, it's like a madness.
Can I tell a story about that?
Please.
The most neighborly I've ever experienced in my existence was during COVID. That's when our neighborhood came alive. That was the best summer of 2020. Was my kids' best summer ever. It was their most all-American summer. We lived on like this street with one. It was one cul-de-sac, and then there was a little branch cul-de-sac that was just like a little bubble, like a bee, like the shape of a bee or something. Like, it's a very small little subdivision. And like that whole summer, everything shut down that spring, 2020. It's just like nobody could come into anybody's houses, but the kids could go ride bikes and play under the trees and do everything. And there was like, all the kids from the neighborhood, all the way up from like the 14 or 15-year-old down to the 7 or 8-year-old. And there was about a dozen of them. And we would, as neighbors, we would just sit out on our front porches, and we could, and like in our lawn chairs, and bring out some, iced tea or whatever, and like watch the kids play, and just like, and we haven't, like, since then we had, and I had a different experience. I'm a nurse by profession, and so during that time I was in the ICU, just grinding it out every day. I had a very embodied experience during COVID, so I had a different experience with that. But it's funny. It's like, well, loving your neighbor is staying home, and yet the whole, you were, of course, in Arkansas. There's this whole, in the South, you've been there, like this whole libertarian streak. It's like, well, and we were not. We didn't want kids to share drinks or food and wash your hands when you come in. Like, we were hyper thoughtful about all that stuff, but it was like, and it was kind of nice because you didn't have like a dozen kids coming into your house. They were all together, and it's just, I'm trying to tie into what you're saying is like, that wasn't the right message of what it meant to love your neighbor, is not come to church and stay home. Like, I understand trying to be safe. But like, yeah, there, I don't know, man.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, yeah. Like that awakening to normal human life that you beautifully experienced in your neighborhood.
Yep.
My hope, my longing is, I expected that. I don't know why I expected this. I idealized, but I expected that kind of awakening to happen in the Orthodox world. Like, but there's so many things in place where that wouldn't happen. But, what I keep thinking about is, if the Eucharist, which I like to call the Messianic feast, that's biblical, and that is more expressive of what it is and what it ought to be. Like, if that were still gathering at a table or outside in the grass, face to face, like you build each other's human bodies, and you build each other into one social body by doing that. Like, isn't that what the Christian life is about? That communion, the face to face.
Yeah, I'll poke on that a little bit.
Okay.
Man, I don't know how and why, like, we find ourselves where we're at. I don't know if do you know my backstory about, like, I don't know how much you've watched content, like, that I used to be a pastor at a church, and like the whole fallout from my decisions, and 7-year hiatus before doing it. I find myself, well, I was having I was trying to get back into helping at our church that I had not helped at for 6 years. I just sat in the chair, brought my family. We had like kind of an official restorative service for me and my wife, and it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna start playing some guitar and drums on Sunday, like just helping. And even though that used to be like my whole career, but I'm just slowly. And then things got hairy with that, and then 9 months later, the pastor's no longer at that church because things continued to get hairy. Let's just put it that. I don't really want to. So, and as a result of all this, like, I walked away from that church Christmas Eve of that year, 2022. So all of 2023, just kind of in exile, and then started meeting with a friend who had also we walked away the same day. And there's so much context I could give to his relationship to the church, my relationship, but deep care. And we start doing church together in a house privately, not telling people, because it's kind of embarrassing. Like, not embarrassing. That's not maybe the right word, but it's like, we're not trying to like, oh, we have the truth. We have the,
Right.
It's like, we're broken and we're grieving. And we're not trying to start like the anti-church to the, like the whole, oh no, easy to be very misunderstood, but you can't control all of that either. So turns into 30 or 50 people over time that, and that's including some children there, like where entering into that grieving process don't feel like they can go back to this, not like, oh, we're the next thing, we're going to change our town for the, oh, we're going to start this movement. Nah. Not that that's complete bullshit, but I just am like, no. And what I've experienced is something closer to a deepening of trust at a level that is pointing to the Mennonite thing, but it's not, probably can't be, for that takes generations. And to your point on Eucharist, the kind of what I've taken from Jonathan Peugeot, with a hierarchy of value, and you mentioned it too with, the levels of communion. Like, oh no, we're tempted in our modern way to say, no, this is communion. That's not communion. And then there's another group that says, no, this is communion. That's not communion. That's religion. This is not sacred, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, this is communion here, but there's also communion here. And they actually both are sacred, but one has a much different place and a much different relational reality of what's being related to here. And the problem is that, from my perspective, is that the modern person wants to say, no, this is it. No, this is the truth. No, this is the truth. No, and it's like, no, they're both true. And they both hold actually intense value. But like, let's take this and allow it to point us to this, and where this is a beautiful part of it, and this is like a even more sacred or religious like practice, but that, like, or even to your point about finding God sitting out under trees. And it's like, well, Jesus did that, but he also was at the temple every week. But he also, this was important, and so was this. Like, but we have moments that like your baptism in the Holy Spirit moment, for many people would convince them that this is the only way. Like, this is the true experience of God. Those people that are doing that in a Sunday morning at some high church, like that's not an experience of God. You know what I mean? Like, no, this is the experience. Now let's take this thing and let's put it on Sunday mornings. And now and that's what we're always going to be trying to find on every Sunday morning or something. And then you get into issues there of like trying to manufacture and manipulate to, I don't know, man. Like, I very much resonate with your story. And I think that the thing, like, I'll respect, in this space of people that these conversations are, that this hierarchy of value, which I think something like Orthodoxy has a good, ideas about reality that relate to that. But sometimes it's even hard to get those ideas about reality into our reality. And that those ideas seem grand and they seem, like, just like, enlightening or something. But then when we get into this, like, well, I think it's probably even sometimes people like will just get back into a Gnostic state and just be like, this is it, like this. No, I have to go into this ethereal LARP to a degree, which I like your shirt. And I agree with some of that though. Like, you have to like put yourself into these places and participate till maybe you have to catch up to that. So, but like you could look at, like, the Orthodox might look at that Mennonite community and something and be like, oh, and you're like, no, they have a piece of what you even pretend to emote about, and yeah, I've had the same kind of gripes or journeys into this. And so like this, I watched John Ayres, is that his name? I don't know. He's like does this thing called Tomata, which
Oh,
is
John Hears. Yeah.
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 So or is it Paul or John? I can't remember.
John. Yeah.
Yeah. So like,
I love you, bro. Yeah. John, we're friends,
yeah.
man.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool. But it's like this idea of a table, and his isn't just an idea; it's a whole liturgy or it's a whole ritual. But like it got into my brain about this group that I'm with, and when we've had the 5 families that have kind of like said, okay, we'll do this for like a year just to kind of deal, you know. When we meet around a table. And one night I even like started it out with a toast with my red Solo cup. It's like it's taking these ideas and it's like, oh no, if we can't have a beautiful candlelight thing, then it's not that. You know what I mean? It's like so much of it has to do with intention. And the intention will aim you at things, and that can grow and it can be cultivated into something more close. But yeah, man, I don't know. I'm just like riffing off of stuff that you've said.
I love that, man. I was just gonna say, I think that's part of what it is to be like the priesthood of all. You know, we're all, you know, if you're in Christ, you're a priest, right? I mean, and you're like,
you really are coming out of Orthodoxy a little bit. It's so hard for you to say that out loud.
Priesthood of all believers, not the priesthood of the priesthood, man. No, it's both and. It's both and. Yeah. Christian says it's both and.
Yeah, dude.
But I mean, it might be both and. But if it's not, but if you're going to start somewhere, you know, like we can't do without being part of that is taking everything and drawing it into that higher, more unified
what is that
space. So like
the unity of multiplicity.
Yeah. I mean, the one, you know, God is one, the one, like, you know, referring everything to God. So like a red Solo cup is like, I might even be a Gnostic in that I think like a red Solo, if there's like these emanations from the one, the red Solo cup is like as far down as you could possibly get, you know. Like that is, you know, I don't think matter's fallen, but it kind of is when it but if you could take the red Solo cup and draw that into the messianic life, you know, like that's acting as a priest. And, you know, part of my beef, like, and maybe I can only talk a little bit about a little bit of American Orthodoxy just from my own experience, but like there's this kind of infantilizing thing that happens with like you surrender to the priest and the idea of priesthood, and like you can't do anything. Like the priests are the ones that do the thing, which I thought reared its ugly head in a big way in 2020. Like I can't even show up. I can watch the priest do the thing. My only relation to the thing is just watching it.
Now you're feeling that Reformation, that embodied Reformation spirit.
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, I am, man. It's there. It's one of the treasures. I got a lot of treasures, you know. Where was I going with that? Yeah, the priesthood, like drawing everything in. I had another thought with that, but and this idea of like fixating. Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, John Hears thing is beautiful and awesome, and that comes from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what makes American Orthodoxy really weird and to some extent pathological, if you're not careful, is that American civilization is bonkers, you know, and so
pot, like melting pot.
There's that, but like the extreme individualism, which now is like manifested as like almost everybody's like hunkered over in their screen, like they're just literally curled in. Like, if you have a functional Orthodox society, people are feasting together and being hospitable with each other all the time. That's just what it is to be Georgian or Greek, you know? And in the context where you normally eat together and commune together as just a way of being human, then you can go into the temple and see all that crystallized as like as a symbolic meal that's giving meaning to all the real meals. My thing is, like, if you don't have the real meals going on, the symbolic meal isn't good enough. Like, you need to, it's urgent that we restore just basic eating together as a sacred thing that we do. And so I'm going a little bit in the Protestant direction. No, a lot. No, because my sense is we desperately need to recover that as top priority. Not
what it's interesting because here's how I hear that is when I think about John Hares and you for $1,500 or 25, I can bring you this idea, and that's actually important because it does give you a telos. Like, it does give you like an orientating principle. That's why I was like, well, hell, we have this first dinner we have here isn't it's on this awesome long wooden table at my in-laws, this beautiful like thing in their dining room, but it's like, we got paper plates and chili, and but I'm like, that's not going to stop me from pointing to something.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter, I could be like, oh, so you're going to wall off Tamada with your price point. No. I like that he's crystallized an idea, that he can, that actually will, oh, let's go do it here. Like, he does that for 10 years. Like, that stuff disseminates. However, that shouldn't stop. Well, I guess part of my makeup is this. Like, I've been doing this since I was 15. Oh, look at Chris Tomlin. Well, I can't do Chris Tomlin, but I could try to get as close as I can in nowhere, Arkansas. Oh my gosh, Hillsong United just blew my mind. I can't do Hillsong United, but I can try to get as close as I can in nowhere, Arkansas. And that whole time is like I have a telos that, and I struggle because at the same time, there's this impulse in me that wants to be like, if I can't do it this way, then I don't want to do it at all. Or like, I'm going to sacrifice the personal relationship for the sake of trying to like execute at this high level. And where I'm at now, it's like a lot of that has shifted, where I think that like parts of relationship, like on a hierarchy of value, like have to supersede. But it kind of depends on what you're trying to do, and you need to be able to like notice that. But yeah, I think that those you said like this ideal is like, it's one thing to preach, become Orthodox, but like I think I saw pretty quick that you're not, the thing you said about we need to start just having meals together. Like in the South, like I grew up when we moved to First Baptist Church, and they built this this annex, that had a what do they call these things? Well, it's not a family life center, that's the gym, but there's a fellowship hall. They literally, like, that's what it's called, fellowship hall. In the fellowship hall, they built a what are the kind of kitchens that like are professional grade kitchen? They built basically like an industrial kitchen with like and every Wednesday from the time that I was in 7th grade, I mean, you paid like $5 or something, or like if you're family, you're paying like $2.50 a kid or something, like, and anybody that comes gets a meal. And there's people, and it's like every Wednesday, and it wasn't potluck, but it was like, it was always there. And now there are issues with it, but it was like, it was kind of sterile in certain ways, but it was like it's pointing at something, and I miss something about it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's like, I'm just trying to, again, I'm like riffing off stuff you're saying. I don't know if that, do you have
That's beautiful,
anything
man.
on?
I mean, like, just add some prayers to that, like, one of the great treasures I picked up from Orthodoxy is like the value of having words that are given to you that you do.
Yes.
You
Mhm.
don't have to come up with something. Like,
Yep.
you have these words and you do them, and everybody does them, and it like makes the, it creates the atmosphere. It sets the tone. It makes the community cohere.
Yep.
It's like the words are rearranging our minds and our hearts, and like, so like probably one of the things that's missing is like the liturgy. Like you add prayers to that, the right words, and it changes the atmosphere. It's not hard.
It is. It is hard, actually. It is hard to push. It's to be countercultural, and this is part of your book. I mean, like, there's a American Christian artist, music artist named Andrew Peterson. He kind of came out of Presbyterian. I think he's Anglican now. Beautiful songwriter. He created a publishing house and an art collective out of Nashville called the Rabbit Room, and I mean, he's very Protestant, but he helped publish these beautiful books called Every Moment Holy, and they're liturgy books for liturgies for cleaning your house, liturgies for the first time you light a hearth fire for the season, liturgies for a special occasion, liturgies for your kid going off to school, like it's and like we used them when we moved houses. Like when we moved, we did a liturgy for that occasion with my kids. And then when my brother got married at the rehearsal dinner, I brought a liturgy out for my speech for him as his best man. And then like whenever on Holy Week with this little group, this little home group, not underneath any hierarchy of authority, like so I was like, we should do a feast during Holy Week. And you mean a potluck? Yeah, potluck. Okay. And at the beginning of it, like I've been using this, it's Presbyterian, it's called the Worship Source Book. But like it's like their like whatever the the weekly thing. And but I found a reading about, because we did it on Holy Wednesday or Spy Wednesday. Of course, I'm on the West timeline. But it's like it was about Judas. And I kind of just brought up this thought through this little reading that, we should be thankful and feast, because even though we all have a little Judas inside of us, or had, or whatever, we celebrate this goodness. So it's like, that's hard to do, because it's hard to do because no one's been doing this. Even idealized worlds. I think, I could be wrong, but maybe there are a lot of people doing it, but it's just not. I don't know. You said it was counterculture. I've thought that. Yes, trying to follow in any way, like seriously, the church calendar is countercultural. I don't know. Riff back.
Yeah. Yeah, no, in that sense, it's hard for sure. What I had in mind when I was saying it's not hard is like, you don't, it's not out of reach. You don't need like really fancy vestments and beautiful pictures everywhere and gold and complicated service books. It's like there's this huge, massive, complex spiritual culture that came out of the Byzantine Empire that is Orthodoxy, that is like is beautiful and profound and awesome, and took a long time to grow. I mean, it wasn't handed over once and for all by the apostle. I mean, it did grow, and it was a lot of people contributed to it, and it's like massive and amazing and beautiful, and you don't have to have all of that in order to have like the fullness of Christian life. It could be some fellowship center where you're having food and you're saying prayers. Like Maybe that with like a sense of how our bodies relate to space and how that relates to creation, redemption of the material world. Like you can always grow closer and closer to the ideal.
Yep.
But you don't be all the way at the ideal in order to do anything.
Yeah, and I think that it's so important culturally that we recognize that.
It's there.
I think it's so important culturally that we recognize that, because it's like, oh, well, it's already here, guys. It's already here. Like, no, we're so far, like, we're like babies having to rediscover this. I mean, in a lot of ways. And and that's one thing to like to have a village, that's centered around this life and this community, and there wasn't this American dream of go off and find your purpose, and you disconnect from the embodiment of family and the embodiment of community in a really profound way, and you're not just your job. Oh, I can do this anywhere. Like, no, that's a lie. It's a lie. You start over, and every time, every big move, and this, you lived this, and I had the privilege to live something close to the opposite. But like, because of that, because of like you were describing how unhomed you are and have felt, and because when we moved to Arkansas from Nashville, where my mom was raised, we lived with her mom. I was born in Fort Worth, lived there till I was 4, Nashville till I was 7. We moved to Arkansas. We moved into the house that was built by my grandfather and great grandfather that my dad was raised in. Moved it. That's where I grew up. And that's still where my parents live now. I didn't realize how crazy that is. That's crazy. And I just like,
I have no idea what that would be like.
That's arbitrary to the Western mindset. That's just completely arbitrary. You are your work, you are your social class, or you are your other identities. You're definitely not your family identity. That you don't, I don't know. And it sounds like you have, you feel it so acutely because you've experienced the opposite of that.
And now I'm in this.
Yeah, where are you at now?
Yeah, it is hard.
Are we finally there? We finally
there? We're starting over. Yeah. No, you're totally right, man. Like you move, you start over. We're like, I was gonna say, we're not even just babies. We're like feral children. Nobody even taught us how to talk. We're like, we're worse than at the beginning.
I like
but,
that. Yeah.
I'm so my wife and I, thank God, through the generosity of my grandmother, bought 40 acres of forest north of here, and we've slowly been very, very slowly. We're living in, this is my wife's parents' basement. We're very slowly. It's like.
I don't know if it's on your or my end, but the internet's struggling for a second here.
It's true. Yeah.
It's like you're really slowly. You bought the land. Now you're
very. Okay, are we good? I don't know what you just said. At the land.
You bought the land, and we're very slowly.
Very slowly. Planting gardens. So our desire is to move up there, to live up there, and that's half away. That's where we want our life to be, and we feel connected to that land. But that is starting over. It's putting an end to this hopping around from place to place. And part of my problem spiritually, I mean, I have a lot of problems, man. Part of like, I'm looking ahead to, I know that it will be possible to live a full Christian life with some people. And what does that look like? I think I'm blanking out again. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't know what's going on with the internet.
A full Christian life, but you don't know exactly what that looks like, but that's like trying to really dig in
That's my sorry. Yeah, no, I would say that's my big question. And it's to some extent Joseph's question, to some extent your question. Everybody in, who's in the meaning crisis is as Christian or post-Christian or pre-Christian or whatever. Like, everybody's longing for the fullness of Christian life. And how do we do that? Where is that? Can we find that? Does that exist? Can that exist? Intuition is that whether or not you're 2 hours away from one, holy Catholic and Apostolic church, for example, like, gathered. I mean, I think Jesus is saying that there is the possibility of full Christian life, pretty much, not pretty much, anywhere, but so if that's the case, if it's true that the fullness of Christian life can exist, what does that look like? And it's hard. A lot of us are dealing with all these images of Christian life. Like, it's not that. And it's not as simple as just like piecing those broken images together either. And it's also, I don't think it's, I mean, maybe it is. In my experience, it hasn't been. It's also not as simple as throwing everything out and just embracing some version of Orthodoxy. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. For some people it is. So that's my question.
It's interesting. I've spoke many times on here about this family that I married into. My wife's uncle retired as an archbishop of the Catholic Church. My wife's aunt is a nun, and her other aunt, one of her other aunts, was a nun that forsook her vows and then became Greek Orthodox, actually. And I remember being a lot younger because we've been together since high school. I'm 39, and I remember my mother-in-law, who her brother was the bishop, and saying one time that her sister said something along the lines of, I'm worried that you just won't have the fullness of the Christian, as a Catholic nun. And this actually came up in conversation not too long ago with them and with my in-laws because we're having these discussions too. There's several pieces that, in some ways, my mother-in-law has a longing for the home of the Catholic Church, but doesn't. And they became like Missouri Synod Lutheran for a long time, and then they were part of this kind of low church non-denom with us for the last 7 years or so, and then now we're kind of in this tabernacle out in the desert, asking a lot of these questions too, and I think that in some ways it's like, yeah, if you devote your whole life to the fullness of the church, like a nun or a priest, like there's a much more embodied reality of the fullness. And then maybe lower on the hierarchy of that fullness is participating in that liturgy of life. And then another level of it is supposed to be in a really human way, but probably in a really spiritual and religious way, the meals and the holy days. And then in a more step back way is I was born, baptized, married, and buried by this community, by this spiritual family, by this. And so it's not just as simple as like, well, what is the full, I guess her sister telling her that is something like, I want you to be closer to the fullness. Because if she was never going to be a nun, then that's a higher level of what this literally the fullness of your life is the church. That's your married, and so probably in some ways to say that without context, and I don't know what that conversation that took place a long time ago, but like to say that without context of what is the fullness. Well, if you're not going to be a nun, then it's not this, but okay, so maybe the context is that it's closer to that. And that like all the pieces that you wove together in your story about like that experience in that basement of that dorm, getting your hands laid on, like I've heard that at time, and even from atheists at times, where like there's something to going forward and having somebody put your hands on you and pray for you. There's something very real about that. I mean, it happened to me. I had that conversation with my parents this weekend about an experience when I was a kid at our charismatic church, that this guy said a prayer over me that still I probably think about once or twice a year, that my parents think about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, but that doesn't fit into the hierarchy of like this ordered life, like, and it does, but like the way that church life kind of plays out. But yeah, we're all, I think part of the other piece of it is like my conversations with Brendan Graham Dempsey helped me formalize a little bit more of like my meta perspective on Christianity. But at some point, like, so say we're outside of it, you're looking at this whole thing, you're through it or whatever, and you're looking back at it, and you're like, well, I could get real postmodern about this, or I could get real modern about this, but at some point I have to make a decision. And we talk about what it means to submit to God. You need to submit to God, or you need to submit to the priesthood, or you need to, and at some point, it's not that the priest gets to say, you submit to me, maybe, or it's not like real submission is you going and being like, now I am going to submit myself to this life. And when I say you, I'm talking about me, like, and I'm ready to not be my own priest in all fullness of my life.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are places where I am, like as an individual, or maybe in my family, or maybe in a small group or something, but not, and that I want to submit myself to that. And I can look at all the arguments and I can look at all the relativism, and it's like I don't know. I'm just telling you where I'm at. I don't have answers directly. I will give an answer, but I don't have like the answer. But I'm going to plot back to you my own personal experience and that I'm wrestling too, man. Like, and it's I think that's the resonating point, is that neither of us are certain. And having lived in that reality, the decade plus within Orthodoxy, and still like I'm wrestling, and I don't know, man. So what kind of So it sounds like you I don't know if you want to say anything to all that. I do have like to kind of hone in on the where you're at now. Tiny, you've kind of shared a little bit, but I don't know if there was anything else, anything you wanted to say to all that. I don't know.
Man, that's good. I mean, yeah, I totally understand the yearning to surrender. You know, it's so exhausting to always be trying to piece it together, you know, like, and that's really abnormal and unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's you know, that's post-modernity. You know, like
We can create our own realities and all that stuff.
Yeah, and even just like part of like the idea that you can choose a religion at all, much less that you have all these like zillions to choose from, but that you could choose a religion at all is like not a normal human thing. Like what you said earlier is the normal human thing. You're born into a community, you know, you're spiritually initiated, you know, shepherded, you die, they bury you. Like you don't think about it too much. You just do it. Like that's what it is to be human. And you know, at some point the beast was unleashed. You know, and of course the conversation for the last 500 years or so has been like, okay, how do we unleash the beast and how do we put it back? And like, you know, like we long to submit, we long to surrender, we long for simplicity, and authenticity and embodiment. Part of my problem, I think, is you know what my wife did. Part of my problem is I'm not just like my wife.
Yeah, I amen.
Men are messed up, man. Men are messed up. We're messed up. We're broken. You know, she grew up Lutheran, and when we met, I was a catechumen, and I was, you know, all gung ho about Orthodoxy and everything, and she was kind of like, yeah, you know, we'll see. She prayed that, you know, I will not convert to this unless you specifically tell me, God, to do it. And then she just waited, and it was months, and then finally God did tell her, like, yes, and then that was it, you know. Like that, whatever that is, like simplicity, like it's broken in me, you know. It's not there, and I don't know how to find it. And part of, you know, I told my weird, I mean, like, you know, I had this conversation with Justin, you could become Orthodox, and then Sunday the prodigal son, like, yeah, you can piece together meaning, like, yeah, God's telling me, but that's my head piecing together a story that is nice, you know. And so, yeah, the surrender, just simplicity. And there's been moments, I mean, I wrote the book out of like, you know, I was roiling for years, and then finally had this moment of clarity and simplicity, and then wrote the book. It's like let me hold on to this, you know. And I wasn't able to hold on to that. But part of it, so like, I do yearn for that simplicity, and I know, like, actually, now that I'm in this wilderness process of like stepping away from this religious identity, I'm actually in my heart getting closer and closer to God. I know that, I can feel that, like, the simplicity is actually sort of not religious right now. It's or the simplicity is in letting a lot of these like religious or spiritual idols fall away, so that there's not much left except for communion there. And so I am going through this. I'm trying to get to what you're talking about, and I understand what you're talking about. And for me, and probably not for most people, that's meaning letting go of a lot of stuff. I will also say, so having said all that, there's also this desire to surrender can have its own problems too. There is a sense, and maybe I just feel it more acutely than a normal person would, but the sense of a loss of selfhood. I called it infantilization earlier, like this idea of the church, capital C, as this metaphysical entity that you're just plugging into and surrendering to is different from the New Testament ecclesia, a gathering. Like the gathering is literally when you're gathering together. That's the gathering. And there, like everything, like the principalities, the powers, things that are happening here have their spiritual component, yes, and we can talk about the church in that sense too. But there's no church without the gathering here and now of the fellowship of like 30 people.
Yep. Yeah.
Like that's the new. There you're known. You know each other face to face, and I think for me, like what I'm feeling most intensely now is this loss of the face in Orthodoxy. And it's maybe all in my imagination, but Ian McGilchrist in the Master and His Emissary, left the hemisphere, right hemisphere thing. He talks about transition from in the Reformation between like the physical space of the church as a center, a sacred center, and that being transformed into a center of attention. And like in Protestantism, you get more and more like this theater arrangement where you're watching something happen versus being in something and participating in it.
Yep.
That's right. And I think that's magnified to the point of like, the TED Talk Christianity, all that stuff that people talk about. And even in like 2020, it's like, I think that's God showing us like, this is what you're doing. But I think I feel lost in Orthodoxy. You're surrounded by these faces that are frozen in time, the icons. You don't see other living human faces. Everybody's facing east. You see the back of the priest's head. You see the back of each other's heads. There isn't this face-to-face communion when you're doing the spiritual practice. And like, I don't even know who I am. And I think, yeah.
Well, what I hear is when that's detached from the other stuff we're talking about, like the village life. Like it's one thing to walk into that situation where all the back of the heads are your people that you just had dinner with the night before, or that feast with, or something like, if that part of it is kind of being enacted, the communal side outside, then whenever when we go from face to face and then we all go to, turning our attention to the good, the good meal, like, that there's something to that. But if you're just dropping in, and driving 2 hours to the, to the truth, the big capital T truth of the big capital O Orthodox, that's not it either. But and I also was hearing, like in my brain, I was hearing Dunbar principle, which the Dunbar principle is just a name for something that we experience as humans, which is once you get past a certain size, you're a crowd. You go from community to crowd, and that's part of the whole. You were talking about getting to TED Talk and rock concert thing. It's like the telos of evangelicalism is to evangelize, is to reach, is to share. If you share with it, that's the telos, then that's what you're going to get. How many people can we share this message with? And that's like, well, maybe we can do that with 1,500 people on a Sunday. Maybe we can, like at one time. And, and it's fun playing live music every week to 1,500. Like, I mean, come on. That's why we like rock concerts, because it's fun. It's true. It's just not ordered. Like, that's Friday night. Like, that's Friday night. Like, I think we need more Friday night local concerts, as part of that, like, village. Like, and then, but I think to the point, though, is we're just kind of like, there's this yearning and this longing for, like, what is this human thing? Because you look around and we're just, a lot of it is, it's a subconscious pretending that everything's okay. And then none of us feel like everything's okay, all the time.
Mhm.
And, it's funny, your wife was Lutheran, my wife is Lutheran, and she's much more grounding and much more that faith, like something there. And like the beauty of a more simple faith, and like something like that, as opposed to this wrestling. And then I was trying to think that one more thread that you brought out there, the fullness, that made me think back to the journey, like with my wife's family, like that my mother-in-law did look around and think, this is just a bunch of people that I don't know, or I don't know if I trust, and they're just saying all these things. And I want something along the lines of genuine, or we use these words authentic, and she moves towards evangelicalism. And then my wife, as the spiritual successor to that, moved even further towards evangelicalism, like marrying me, like, and here I am looking at all the issues that we're also talking about within evangelicalism. And I'm looking at that thinking, like, we need more of this. And so it's like, that's this process. And, and I'm just also sitting here listening to our conversation. I was like, this is thinking out loud. This is thinking out loud. And you said that's been, you're wanting to do more of that because you think quietly, you think internally, and the written medium is a different expression of thought. And I think that I need to do more of that, and, but yeah, dude, I think that's cool. How have you felt, like, trying to get some of this out, with your story? Like,
Mhm.
what's that, what's that feeling like for you right now?
Well, yeah, it's weird. I mean, it's kind of painful. Like, my wife and my kids are going to church, and it's Lent now, so they're there at church all the time, and I'm not, and I'm writing this stuff that people 1,000 miles away are like, oh yeah, that that speaks to my heart. That's exactly yeah, like, it's that's kind of backwards, it's but it is what it is, and my long-term plan is not to be in a different space with my wife and kids, of course, of course. But I was thinking, as you were talking, I kept thinking about, like, what came to mind is something Pajot said about, like, the death of Christianity, and like how we need to go through this death, and it's like in the Exodus, like, you got to remember, all these Hebrews, were like part of this beautiful, coherent life, with like deep symbolism that had merged over thousands of years, and like the process of walking away into the desert, and then like facing each other, like, here we are, we don't know what's next, what we're coming from has shaped us in a lot of ways, but we're in this process of letting a lot of it go, and also keeping a lot of the treasures. Like that's what Peugeot was saying. Like this like when you go through this disintegration process, then you can figure out what is really worth keeping and carrying forward. We like mostly are doing it. That's what we do. And it's good that our wives are very grounded and steady, but it's our job right now to like feel the pain and look at the horizon, and it's a big mess, and we are in the wilderness, and that's real. We can't deny it. There's no easy fixes. There's no easy outs. So I'm feeling it. And I became Orthodox before this latest wave of people, coming off the Peterson Peugeot pipeline to, like I became Orthodox before that. And so, now I'm entering into the pain that there have been exempt from, kind of. It's painful and it's hard, but it feels good.
Do you feel like that's what Jacob's pointing at too? Did I say, is it Joseph?
Joseph?
I can't. Yeah. Do you think that that's kind of what he's pointing at too? Even though he's still in it, he's saying, y'all don't know what you think you know, or something like that.
Right.
And
right. I mean, yeah.
Because y'all are saying something similar, but from he's in and you've kind of stepped out, but you're still both kind of saying something similar.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when I was listening to him, like I'm attracted to his. I'm attracted to the fact that he's like that he's well past an idealization of what of this idea.
Yeah.
Like I'm attracted to that, and and so and you are past that obviously as well. And then begs both actually still begging the question.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I want to say, yeah, I mean, I think he and I and you, I mean, we are in the same space in a lot of ways. We're in, and I'm carrying so much with me, and I can't not carry so much with me. So I'm still, yeah, I do think Joseph and I are coming at the same thing from different directions, and you're coming in from your direction. But there's something that is emerging, of course. I mean, the rewilding of Christianity. I mean, people keep, there's something there. Something is emerging. God is real. God is breathing His Spirit, across the face of the earth, bringing something new, as He does. That's what He does. He's always creating new life, and it's painful and it's confusing, but it's also okay. It's like, to feel the intensity of the longing for something is good, because everything that's not God is an idol, and we're in this situation that like churns up idols like fast.
That's the human situation, man.
Yeah.
Get back to your Presbyterian roots on that. We're an idol factory.
Yep. That's right.
I don't.
Speaking of the human situation, I was gonna say I got to take another break, or we could.
Yeah, man. Well,
wrap it up here.
Let me see. Yeah, what I want to do, like we got about 10 minutes on my clock here. Like I'll pause it, and then when you come back, let's talk about your work more specifically, and then close it out. All right, man. Hold on just a second.
Okay.
All right, we're back. So you just mentioned rewilding of Christianity. Is that King's North or is that Shaw? I can't remember which to attribute that to?
I mean, both of them, and
Okay,
Dreher, you know, that's kind of like a phrase that, yeah.
so on that, you know, like, yeah, I mean, I think we can both say that we're feeling that. And you know, so you wrote a book, and I mean, and it's funny in this conversation you said the subtitle is how orthodoxy is, like, you know, radically countercultural, and you said, like, you had this crystallization, and then all of a sudden, then you're like, ugh, and you're kind of like, and I'm out, like, but you know, tell us about the book, and maybe that can kind of give us a little insight, you know, and then of maybe why that kind of happened. And then, you know, I wanted you to talk a little bit about on your, stuff you write about on Sabbath Empire, your Substack, and kind of point people to that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Cool, man. Yeah. It's the book is Sunlily's Eastern Orthodoxy as a Radical Counterculture. The Sunlily's title is like the lilies of the, and I've decided to make an entire philosophy out of just that passage. now in my Substack, I like cite like every single essay. I tie that in somehow. It's like everything comes out of that. But yeah, Paul Kingsnorth very graciously called it hopeful dreaming for dark times, something like that. And it is, and Martin Shaw called it refreshing and even restorative. And I, you know, both those guys are wonderful, and I appreciate that. It's like envisioning orthodoxy as I wish it would be, and think maybe it could be. It's the phrase I use somewhere in the book is like the orthodoxy of the birds and the flowers. Like I sort in a sense, I like orthodoxy is way too much for me. Oh, it always has been, and it definitely is now. There's just too much to take on. Like the history is too massive to embrace. All of it's like too much. And in these cycles of up and down of like enthusiasm to cynicism to enthusiasm, like I wanted to just distill it down to like, here's the orthodoxy that I can hang on to, because I want to be stable and grounded. I don't actually enjoy going through these spin cycles all the time. You know, that's not fun. And there, you know, there's such deep beauty in orthodoxy. And also my wife is Orthodox and my kids are, or you know, like there's a lot of motivation to stay rooted, although that kind of has evolved in its own way in the last couple of years. But so it's a visionary text, drawing things out from a lot of crazy directions and putting them together. I talk about the forest churches in Ethiopia as like if we're really going to do Orthodox life to the fullest, this is what space should look like. It should look like a forest, and then there's the inner space with the altar and everything. So yeah, visionary, idealistic. But there's like I also describe a way to do prayer in the morning that is like people have found helpful, that I've found helpful, and which no one taught me. I had to like teach myself all this stuff, so maybe that's maybe I shouldn't have called the subtitle that Eastern Orthodoxy as a Radical Counterculture. Maybe I should have called it, this is what I see could be a radical counterculture at some point if we want to do it.
I still think Eastern Orthodoxy is radical counterculture for the American life.
That's for sure. Yeah, that indeed. It's definitely, and in Europe too. I mean, in England and Ireland, where Paul and Martin are, I mean, like that kind of life is a counterculture. I would say most of the people. So I didn't think anybody would read it at all. I was just writing it for myself, like, and But I emailed Paul Kingsnorth and like, hey, I got this piece of garbage book that like, can I send it to you and you just throw it in your trash or something? And he loved it and everything. But I'd say most people who have responded to it are not Orthodox and probably aren't going to be Orthodox. It responds to these needs that they have. And a lot of people said, like, is this Orthodoxy or is this something else? Like, if I go to an Orthodox church, am I going to find this? And some people said, like, I got interested in Orthodoxy because of your book. And when I went to go to a church, it was just something else. It wasn't that. Which that's my idealism crashing into real people. And so part of what I want to, part of like the stepping away is like, I don't want to make claims for something that I can't make claims for. I just, I see my fundamental job is as a poet, and a poet takes the universe and distills it down to something like here it is so you can see it. Like, that's all I want to do. I don't want to take up a position. I don't want to defend a team. I don't want to toe the line and all that. So, was that your question?
Yeah, man. And tell us about, get drill down a little bit in the next minute or two on your Substack, like what your work's like on Substack.
Yeah. Sabbath Empire is one of my names for the kingdom of God. And I'm really just, I'm trying to envision like radical but simple ways to deal with the meaning crisis. And so it's like maybe hack theology or something, outsider theology. I don't know. Bad poetry, philosophy. And really, my assumption is that I'm not unique. I'm just drifting along with the times like everyone else is, and I'm going within and really feeling how I'm feeling and putting that in words, and I hope that's useful for people. And a lot of people, a lot of Orthodox people who got on board because they're expecting one thing, bailed out because they got another, but that's all right. That's okay. It's wild stuff. It's cool.
The title of your book was Sun
Lilies.
Sun Lilies, how Eastern Orthodoxy is a radical counterculture, and your Substack is Sabbath Empire. Graham, man, I'm glad you reached out, and I think it would be really cool to, gather up a few people to kind of flesh out this conversation in more good faith and hope, and respect. And I'm really glad that you reached out to have this conversation. So I think hopefully we'll loop around again sometime when it makes sense in the future. Yeah,
God willing, I would love that, man. Christian, thanks so much. Like, this is what I hoped it would be. Conversation, real conversation. So I would love to talk again soon.
All right, man. Well, I'm going to hit this video and we'll close this thing out backstage. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.